Yeah, my study was with regard to if we look at the conditions in South Africa and even in the world as well, but in particular South Africa, the conditions within our communities where that lead to them protesting about basic service delivery. It is telling us that there's something wrong. So there was various initiatives by government in the past as well. Following these protests, and the protests, what they are also saying is that although it increased in number at some states, around about 2017, it stabilized, but the intensity of that became more aggressive, where they were destroying infrastructure and all of those kind of things. So, meaning that the frustration levels are very high. And yes, so if we look at the interventions of government, where they were looking at the back to basics and then also the turnaround strategy and those kind of things around about 2014 and 2019, I think, to try and turn the tide, the more they try and do that, the more we see that it's still continuing. And then it was also the COVID-19 outbreak that also exposed communities without basic service like water and sanitation for more than 10 years already, and of which the latest outbreak of cholera in Hammanskraal, Rooiwal wastewater treatment that were related to the wastewater treatment works, then also expose facilities that was not maintained and cannot provide basic or water, safe water to those communities. And yeah, so all of those kind of things is really showing us that if we think about Section 152 of the Constitution, stating that the municipalities provide services to the communities, basic services in a sustainable way, and then also to ensure a safe and healthy environment, together then with local economic development. These developments that we are seeing there leading to the protest of our communities are clearly showing that there's something not done properly. So that then also, and then also because of environmental health, the field that I'm in, we originated from the Industrial Revolution in the UK in the 18th, 19th century, and where you saw exactly the same kind of tendencies where, because of the influx of people for the industrial opportunities, put pressure on municipalities, and the municipalities then didn't develop the basic services, for example, water, sanitation and housing and all of that, and the refuse removal at the same pace, resulting then in disease outbreaks that occurred, and which then subsequently led to the first Public Health Act somewhere in the 1800s. Now, during that time, it was always a crisis that was putting the authorities on the level where they had to start responding. Now, you see exactly the same tendencies even today, where you sit with urbanization, and urbanization will continue, seems forever, because people are moving to your city environments where they can get a better opportunity for job opportunities, and then also teaching and all of that. And as a result, there's more need then for the services within these cities or big cities. So people are moving from your rural kind of areas from other parts of the world, and putting pressure then on the municipalities. So then as a result, I was then looking at why all these things happen. Prevention is better than cure, but the maintenance we do not prioritize within the budgets of the municipalities. Environmental health is preventative health, to prevent people from getting into hospitals or clinics because of, and looking at the compliance of water and availability of water, sanitation and all of these basic services, food quality and all of that. Now, if prevention is then better than cure, why didn't environmental health then also get this continuous attention or support to ensure then that there's sustainable service delivery, because sustainable service delivery help you then to keep up the quality and all of that for your communities, and then for prevention of health as well. So I was then looking at what was causing these things, or what should be done differently. Is there something that we miss somewhere? So I did my PhD study then on to look at the effectiveness of environmental health services. But as a first part of that, I first wanted to answer the question on what determines effective service delivery, municipal service delivery. As part of my literature review, I used the grounded theory to base my study on, and during that grounded theory, through an integrated literature review, it emanated that there's what we call four fundamentals of effective service delivery, which is mandate cognizance, which are related to the legislation that are provided to tell institutions and its officials what they should do, and also to give them the authority and to do these kind of functions. So we know now that the different types of municipalities, category A, B, and C, or metropolitan municipalities, are covering the full scope of municipal services as being listed in Schedules 4 and 5B of the Constitution. But where you sit outside the metro areas, this is where the district municipalities and the local municipalities are working together. And those relationship issues between the district municipalities and the local municipalities, they share some of those basic services. For example, the water service authorities and water service providers are responsible for the provision of water, the maintenance of the infrastructure and all of that. Environmental health, that is being based at district municipalities, are responsible for identifying environmental health risks that are related to these services like water, sanitation, solid waste, and some other functions as well. So those functions are being regulated by legislation, and that gives the mandate for the institutions and the officials, and then also the authority. So that is what the mandate means, is having the scope of functions and the scope of authority. Now, those mandates are also expectations from government that need to be implemented. Now, that need to be executed. Now, typically your mandate execution then, as the second fundamental for effective service delivery, requires integrated planning, programming and control, and then also having your necessary resources, human resources and all of that to be in place. Then the third fundamental refers to the leadership support for these departments or units to physically implement the services, because it's the leadership, the management and the political leadership that either support a program and release money or allocate money towards the different programs. So if they are not in favor of, like for example, preventative work, you don't see that in the budget or all of that. So there's two components then of this leadership support. The one is symbolic, so leadership will typically say we support you, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the actual money, and then also the equipment and people and the support for the program so that you can go and implement in the communities. And then the other component of that leadership support, it's action support. And action support, you can see that, you can measure that in a budget. Yes, there's an increase of the budget towards a specific function. And that is the kind of thing that one need to look at and monitor to see if the support from leadership are really serious to focus on preventive health. Back to section 152, where government expect the municipalities to provide those basic services to the communities to ensure a safe and healthy environment. Section 153 stipulate that the municipalities must prioritize their basic services in their budgets, their organizational structures, their whole programming and administration. Now, typically, if you see that shift from leadership, action leadership support, and they do what it is expected to focus on the basic service, to then one would have seen increase, for example, in investment in basic service like water, sanitation and solid waste. But if we look at the conditions out there, in the communities, you see a build-up of illegal waste dumping, waste not being removed quite often. You see sewage spillages, leakages happening within the communities itself, and those are all basic services. So typically, if leadership, action leadership support, support is coming from your leadership, typically they would have prioritized those kind of things, and you would have seen a reduction of that in time, and which is not always happening. So the fourth fundamental of effective service delivery, it's all about the ultimate is to the satisfaction of the communities. So if I'm looking at this as a breach with a mandate on the one side, the legislation saying what is expected, and giving that authority and responsibilities to the different institutions, the ultimate aim is to satisfy your community's basic needs on the other side. So with these 4 fundamentals, one can now see how they are interlinked with each other. And if you miss on the one, it is having an effect on the other one, and ultimately then within our communities. And that is why we see there's ways that you can measure the community satisfaction. So if they are satisfied, normally they will share positive news on social media, on newspapers and things like that, or they will just keep quiet. But the moment when they are dissatisfied, they will follow basically an escalation of events. First of all, for example, interacting with ward councillors, sharing their disappointment about certain things. They will go, for example, to the municipal offices and report something. But if they get ignored then, they will then start organizing themselves into rallies or taking the municipalities, for example, to court, or negative publicity in your newspapers and the social media as well. And this is how these things then start escalating to the point where the full frustration basically you see in these protests happening, and then the intensity of these protests where destruction of infrastructure and all of that. So somewhere, if you measure it and you look at your response from your communities, you can see that somewhere in between with your mandate execution, your leadership support, this is where the things normally fall flat, because the legislation is already there. We know it that many studies have been done, and where they were saying there's nothing wrong with our legislation. It's the implementation that's the issue. And this is typically playing out here in this thing as well. Now that then brought me to another component of this whole looking then at these 4 fundamentals, knowing now how they follow on each other, they influence on each other. The question is then, how do you use that to identify gaps so that you can intervene? So in the process then, I came across the construal different theories, different lenses then looking at service delivery challenges within our communities, which is affecting then environmental health as well, and particularly prevention. The one is the construal level theory. Now the construal level theory consists of 4 types of psychological distance heuristics. So it's the distance between the decision maker and the issue. And those they called, the first one is hypothetical distance, bias. So it's less probable that something will happen. So if the decision maker think that that thing is somewhere going to happen, maybe in the distant future, it's not probable now, then they will leave it on the sideline. Then the second one is temporal distance bias, which refer to now versus later. So it's almost the same as the previous one, to say that if something is going to happen in future, rather just leave it, because we are dealing with now the immediate things. And then the third one is the spatial distance bias, looking at the view remote locations as less detail. So it's that you typically find, for example, your head office are well looked after, but your satellite offices, for example, or communities are not so well looked after, because they are further away from the main center where the big bosses are sitting and making the necessary decisions. So and one can clearly see these kind of dynamics within rural communities, where you sit with the head office of a district municipality, for example, or the local municipality head office, and then they have satellite offices in other parts of the community, that those are not at the same standard. And those communities within the town center normally are well surfaced compared to your outlying areas as well. So this is typically talking about the spatial distance. Then the social distance bias is a us and them attitude, where, and you can clearly see that within the political kind of environment as well, where there's always groups that are being created to say, political groups, for example, along color or religion or whatever else. And the moment when those kind of divisions are being created, then it becomes an issue of those closer to us, the decision makers, as being associated with a certain group or whatever else, they will look better after that. And that you can see around the globe, similar kind of trends as well. So the question is then, if we look at even a social distance kind of play off within a municipality itself, from an environmental health point of view, environmental health practitioners, for example, will typically identify, let's say, water quality not being up to standard, or sewage spillages happening, or waste built up in a certain area. Then they are dependent on sector departments, typically engineers, for example, in the Water Services Authority, water service provider section or unit or department, and the same is with the waste section as well. Then you find these fights between these different units, and where they don't see together. We are actually here to provide service to the communities, but they instead fight with each other. Don't come and tell me what I must do, and always trying to show the wrongdoing. And that then translates into back to the first fundamental of effective service delivery, where you can clearly see that there's a dissonance from mandate cognizance. Because if both of us, environmental health, for example, and the engineering or the water service provider guys, were cognizant to know that the reason why we provide water is to satisfy the basic needs of our communities in terms of Section 152 of the Constitution. And so it's now these biases that we find from management level and even at operational levels affecting then service delivery on the ground, which makes it very difficult to implement. Then another theory is also the Easton's political systems theory, where he's talking about a black box in which the decisions are being made, and that opaque environment or situation where the decisions are made are not necessarily always to the benefit of the communities, or as per if let's say a risk was identified, that the responses or the decisions will necessarily result in a reduction of that risk. So that also makes it quite difficult with that mysterious decision-making environment where in which these kind of things are happening. And then Luhmann's decision-making theory are referring to the things of that we are interconnected with networks within these municipalities, within the different departments, and then with the communities as well, with pressure groups and you name it. So it's a difficult environment where these things are happening. But somewhere we need to then find ways to navigate around that. And that is where my conclusion then is basically to say, if you find yourself in a preventative kind of work environment, like environmental health, and then also within the municipalities typically responsible for maintenance kind of work, we are not necessarily going to change this whole thinking line or how it happened, because preventative health or environmental health was not recognized in the past. It's still not being recognized, and it will also not be recognized in future. It's mainly crisis dependent, and crisis then becomes a triggering event for environmental health or any preventative kind of work to use that opportunity, because whilst the attention is there for that moment, this is when you need to push to get the necessary resources and attention. And that is the kind of thing what happened with the COVID-19. All of a sudden, the environmental health guys were reporting that they were being regarded as important. They were getting money, they were getting support for their programs. But the moment when that subsided, then everything went back to normal. The same is with the listeriosis outbreak as well, and we can see the same with the Hammanskraal cholera outbreak as well, where there was previous attempts, budgets and things like that for that wastewater treatment works and for improving the conditions. Because of the political instability within the Tshwane Metro, for example, it resulted in nothing. And then all of a sudden, change of political regime, which also created a triggering event and opportunity. And then the cholera outbreak put sufficient pressure then on those decision makers to make the move to say, okay, we need to now invest in improving the wastewater treatment works. A year later, after the cholera outbreak, that those communities are still without quality water. So the thing is now, if you find yourself now in this preventative environment, how do you further use that opportunity then to ensure that those communities do get access, for example, to safe water? And that brings me to the next thing of how do we use our planning tools, the integrated development plans, service delivery budget implementation plans, making certain that the sector departments do include, for example, those environmental health risks being identified. And then environmental health units, for example, can use the sector departments SDBIPs to check in the medium-term expenditure framework if at least the, let's say it's a sewage spillage from a specific pump station, if there's provision in the sector department's budget and SDBIP in the next MTF period where they specifically say that pump station will be fixed. So in general, this is broadly my understanding and finding this far. That creates opportunities for us to take it forward, but it's an uphill battle.